Christmas Eve was supposed to feel warm, but that morning the air felt wrong. Too still, too clean, like the house had been wiped of sound overnight. I woke up to a thin light cutting through the blinds and the faint hum of the heater. No music, no laughter, no smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. It was the kind of silence that doesn't wait for you to notice, it announces itself. The plan was simple. We'd leave together in the afternoon, a family trip we'd been planning for weeks. A mountain cabin, matching pajamas, over-decorated trees, the kind of thing people post on social media to prove they're happy. I had spent the week running errands, booking the airport shuttle, wrapping the last of the gifts, making sure everything was ready. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. But when I walked into the kitchen, something small and strange caught my eye. The counter was bare except for a single printed sheet half-tucked under a candle. Plane tickets. 3 of them. My parents and my younger sister. No fourth name. No me. I remember staring at the page long enough for the edges to blur. The first thought that crossed my mind was a technical error, maybe a missing page. But when I flipped it over, the back was blank. I checked the clock. 9:13 a.m. Not early, not late. Too late for an airport run, but maybe they were still packing. Maybe. The hallway was spotless. No luggage. No shoes. No coats hanging by the door. The car wasn't in the driveway either. Just tire marks cutting through the frost. My phone lay on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, expecting missed calls or a message. There were none. I opened my family group chat. Empty. Then gone. The name of the group disappeared right before my eyes, replaced by the system message that I was no longer part of it. For a second, I thought it was a glitch. I closed the app and opened it again. Nothing. My contact list looked thinner too. My mother's name, missing. My sister's, gone. Even my father's number had vanished, as if I had never saved it. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, my mind folding inward. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't calm you, it deafens you. I could feel it pressing against my chest. I tried to breathe through it. Maybe they left early. Maybe someone made a mistake with the booking. Maybe there was a surprise waiting on the other end. I kept reaching for explanations that felt smaller than the truth. On the table, next to the tickets, was the breakfast I'd prepared the night before. Wrapped sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, napkins folded neatly inside a bag labeled travel snacks. My handwriting stared back at me. I had written that label like a fool, humming Christmas songs under my breath, thinking I was part of something that never included me in the first place. The refrigerator hummed softly, the kind of white noise that fills the spaces people leave behind. I walked through each room like a stranger. My parents' door stood open, their closet half empty. The suitcases I helped carry up from the basement earlier that week were gone. My sister's room looked stripped bare except for the tinsel lights still blinking faintly on her mirror. I remember glancing at the family photo above the mantel, the one from last Christmas, for smiles that looked rehearsed. I tried to remember the last time we'd actually laughed together without someone being the punchline. I couldn't. The realization came slowly, not like a scream, but like a leak in the ceiling you don't notice until the floor caves in. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me. Intentionally. I checked social media, half expecting to find a post, a hint, something to make it less cruel. Nothing yet. Just the digital echo of a life still pretending everything was fine. That was the moment when I stopped trying to explain it away. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands resting flat against the surface. The candle next to the tickets had burned halfway through the night before, leaving a pool of hardened wax that glistened under the morning light. The smell of it, vanilla and cinnamon, made me nauseous. They had promised this Christmas would be different. No fights, no tension, no forgotten plans. They had looked me in the eyes and said we'd start over. I believed them because belief is easier than disappointment. I didn't cry. Tears felt too human for what I was feeling. What rose instead was something heavier, denser, the kind of weight that doesn't sit on your chest, but fills your lungs until breathing feels like a choice. The hours passed slowly. The sun slid higher, the frost melted off the window pane, and I just sat there watching it drip down like time dissolving into nothing. Eventually, I stood up, walked to my room, and looked at my own suitcase waiting by the door. Packed, labeled, ready to go like the obedient shadow I'd always been. I left it there. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just understanding. The kind that rearranges you quietly. They had left for their perfect Christmas, and in doing so, they had given me mine, a Christmas where the noise finally stopped pretending to be love. The day stretched longer than it should have. The kind of day that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I made coffee, but it tasted wrong. The cup felt heavy in my hands. I kept checking my phone, unlocking it every few minutes like new messages might appear if I stared long enough. None did. I tried calling my mother first. The call didn't even ring. Just a quick click, then silence. I tried my father. Same thing. My sister's number wasn't even saved anymore. I scrolled through my contacts, realizing that one by one, the names were gone. Family group chat, gone. Message threads, gone. Like someone had gone through my phone and erased every trace of them. I thought about the night before. My younger brother had borrowed my phone to check the weather. He'd smiled that easy, careless smile that always meant something else. I hadn't questioned it. Now I understood. It wasn't about the weather. It was about control. About erasing my existence before they left. I turned on the TV for background noise. Every channel was playing something cheerful: snowflakes, music, people hugging in scarves and sweaters. The kind of happiness that feels like mockery when you're alone. I muted it and let the images flicker in silence. The tree lights blinked rhythmically behind me, soft and artificial, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to anyone anymore. At some point, I walked to the front door, half expecting a car to pull in, someone to laugh, to say it was a mistake. But the driveway stayed empty. The world outside was wrapped in white stillness. I stood there, barefoot, the cold seeping into my feet through the tiles. That was when the truth stopped being abstract. They were gone. And they had meant for me to find out like this. I checked social media again, more out of habit than hope. Still nothing. But that, in itself, was an answer. My family had always been loud online photos, stories, inside jokes. The silence now was too coordinated. They weren't posting because they didn't want anyone to know. They were hiding it. I sat on the couch and stared at the dark TV screen until my reflection started to look like someone else. It felt strange, sitting in a house I'd worked to keep running, a house that didn't even belong to me emotionally anymore. I thought about every bill I'd paid, every grocery list I'd crossed off, every time someone had said I was overreacting when I pointed out how much they took from me. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. My effort, my time, my small gestures to keep peace where there never really was any. The memories came uninvited. The birthdays where my gifts were funny, jokes that no one else got. The family dinners where I'd cook and clean while everyone else laughed about their lives. The vacations I helped fund but never truly enjoyed because someone always found a way to make me the punchline. They used to say I was too serious, too sensitive, too detached. I used to believe them. But sitting there in that empty house, surrounded by the faint echo of their absence, I realized I had only ever been too patient. By noon, the air felt heavier. I opened the windows just to feel something cold, something real. Snowflakes drifted in and melted on the floor. I watched them disappear, tiny and pointless, and thought about how easy it was to vanish from someone's life when they decided you didn't matter. I tried to eat, but food didn't make sense anymore. I paced from room to room, tracing the ghost outlines of their presence, an empty hook where a coat had hung, the faint ring on the table where a cup used to sit, the indentation on the couch where my sister used to throw herself dramatically after a fight. I picked up my phone again, scrolled through my call history. Nothing. Every record erased. It was as if I had dreamed an entire family into existence and woken up to find the dream fading. Eventually, I stopped trying. I put the phone face down and sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the packed suitcase still waiting patiently by the door. That bag had been my proof of belonging, the quiet statement that I was part of their plans. Now it looked ridiculous, like an unanswered question. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when you've run out of lies to tell yourself. That's what I felt then, not rage, not despair, just the first clean breath of truth after years of breathing recycled air. They hadn't forgotten me. They had removed me. Deliberately. Outside, the snow had started again, softer now, almost kind. I stood by the window watching it fall, coating everything in white. For the first time, I noticed how beautiful it looked when untouched, pure, unmarked, silent. It made me think about how many years I had spent trying to earn a place in a family that never intended to keep me. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I simply watched the world go still again, and in that stillness, something inside me settled. By nightfall, I knew what I had to do. By morning, the ache inside me had shifted into something clearer. It wasn't anger yet, anger needs sound, and I had none left. What I felt was a stillness so absolute it bordered on focus. The silence that had haunted me for years finally became useful. I walked through the house the way someone walks through a museum of their own mistakes. Every object had a story, and every story pointed back to me. The new refrigerator in the kitchen had been my bonus purchase last spring. The washer and dryer in the basement, mine too. The couch, the microwave, the Wi-Fi plan, all registered under my name. Even the power company recognized me more than my family did. For the first time, that imbalance looked less like generosity and more like leverage. I pulled out a notebook and began writing, not as a list of revenge, but of ownership. Receipts, bills, payments, all of it belonged to me. I found the folder I'd kept tucked behind old tax documents and laid everything out on the table. Proof had weight. It made things real. Outside, snow kept falling in thin, slow ribbons. The sound of it against the windows reminded me of time running out. Somewhere far away, they were probably laughing, taking photos and coordinated sweaters, pretending the missing piece in their frame was intentional. I wondered how long it would take before they realized what they'd done wasn't harmless. I cleaned, not because the house needed it, but because movement steadied my hands. Every plate, every drawer, every folded blanket, tiny rehearsals for leaving. The rhythm calmed me. With each motion, the decision grew heavier, then easier. By afternoon, the idea had settled completely. I would take back what was mine. Not in fury, not to make them suffer, but to stop carrying them. I opened the cabinets and started separating things into piles, mine, theirs shared. The shared pile stayed empty. It was startling how little truly belonged to all of us. In the living room, I unplugged the television I'd bought 2 Christmases ago. I wrapped the cords neatly, labeled the box, and moved it near the door. Then the router, the lamp, the small things no one noticed until they vanished. Each click, each unplug, felt like a breath released. I moved slowly, methodically, like someone packing up a version of herself she no longer needed. The walls looked bare when I was done, but lighter too, like they could finally breathe without expectation hanging from them. When the last box was sealed, I stood in the hallway and listened. The hum of the heater, the soft buzz of the refrigerator, small reminders that life was still happening, even if no one was there to witness it. I turned off the heat, unplugged the fridge, and felt the quiet deepen. It wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. For years, I had filled the gaps they left behind, financial, emotional, practical. They called it family. I called it survival. Leaving would not make me cruel. Staying had already done that. I took one final walk through the rooms. My parents' bedroom smelled faintly of perfume and dust. My sister's mirror still blinked its string of lights, flashing in uneven patterns. I unplugged it, wound the cord, placed it gently on her bed. The gesture wasn't out of kindness. It was closure. In my room, the packed suitcase still waited by the door. I didn't need much: clothes, documents, a few sentimental things. On the desk sat a photo of all of us from years ago, taken before the jokes started cutting deeper than laughter. I looked at the faces, all frozen in a happiness that had never existed, and left the frame behind. Before leaving, I placed one sheet of paper on the kitchen counter. No words of anger, no apology. Just a simple sentence I'd written carefully in blue ink. You wanted a vacation without me. Now you'll learn what life without me feels like. I folded it once, set it beneath the 3 plane tickets, and turned off the lights. Outside, the cold hit like clarity. The driveway stretched empty, snow filling the tire tracks they'd left behind. I stepped into them one by one, retracing the path until it ended at the street. Then I kept walking. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, gold against the gray sky. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that every step away from that house felt like oxygen returning. Behind me, the house sat silent, waiting for their return. In 5 days, they would come back to the version of their world they'd built on my effort, and they would find it gone. For the first time, the idea didn't scare me. It felt inevitable, almost peaceful. There are kinds of revenge that scream, and there are kinds that hum quietly beneath the surface. Mine would hum. As I reached the main road, snow gathered on my coat, melting instantly. I didn't wipe it away. The world around me smelled clean again, like fresh air after a storm. I walked without looking back, carrying nothing but what had always been mine, the proof, the calm, and the silence they once taught me to endure. That silence was mine now, and I intended to keep it. 5 days later, the house they once called home became a crime scene of their own making. They returned under a sky bruised with snow clouds, laughing through exhaustion, dragging their luggage across the driveway. Their voices must have filled the air for a few fleeting seconds, right before the front door opened. Then came the silence, the kind that spreads fast, swallowing sound before it can escape. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the moment perfectly. The smell of stale air, the emptiness where warmth used to be. The refrigerator unplugged and humming its last breath, the heater off, the rooms hollow. The house must have looked like it had been paused mid-sentence. No couch, no television, no Wi-Fi signal blinking in the corner. Only the faint outline of where things used to stand, like ghosts that hadn't realized they'd been evicted. The neighbors said the shouting started almost immediately. Voices rising, overlapping, disbelief turning into accusation. Someone dropped a suitcase. Someone else slammed a door. I could picture my sister pacing, my father gesturing wildly, my mother covering her mouth with shaking hands. The sound of a family discovering they had built their comfort on someone else's labor and never noticed until it was gone. By then, I was sitting in my new apartment across town, a small second bedroom rented from a friend. The furniture didn't match and the walls were thin, but it was mine. The space smelled faintly of paint and independence. I had unpacked the essentials, my clothes, my documents, a few books, the mug I always used for morning coffee. There was peace in the way light spilled unevenly across the floor. That afternoon, I made soup from scratch. The quiet around me felt earned. I didn't flinch when my phone started vibrating on the counter. At first, it was one call, then another, then a flood. Notifications stacked on top of each other until the screen was nothing but red missed call icons. My mother, my sister, my father. Dozens of messages followed, long ones, angry ones, desperate ones. Words that blurred into static when read too quickly. They wanted answers. They wanted me to come home, to explain, to fix. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. I had fixed everything for years, bills, broken appliances, problems they didn't want to name. This time, I didn't move. I let the phone buzz itself into silence. Later that evening, the police arrived. A soft knock on the door, not urgent, just procedural. The officer looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from mediating too many family dramas disguised as emergencies. He told me my family had reported me missing, that they were also concerned about possible theft. The words sounded heavy coming from him, almost embarrassed. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply opened a folder from my bag, the same one I had organized back in the house. Receipts, invoices, utility statements, warranties. Every proof of ownership neatly filed and dated. The officer flipped through it, his expression changing from skepticism to quiet recognition. He closed the folder gently, thanked me for my time, and left without another word. The night after that, I sat by the window, watching snow fall over the city. Somewhere across town, the house that had drained me was probably still echoing with their confusion. The power company would be calling soon, wondering who would take over the unpaid bills. The Wi-Fi would go dark once the final payment cycle ended. The house would grow colder, emptier. I thought about them sitting together for the first time without distractions, surrounded by the pieces of a life they didn't know how to maintain. They would argue over whose fault it was. My father would say they had been pranked. My sister would insist she was innocent. My mother would call it a misunderstanding, each of them looking for someone else to blame. They would never see the pattern, the years of small betrayals that had led to this exact moment. For a long time, I had thought revenge meant anger. That to take something back, you had to destroy it. But that night, I understood something different. The real revenge was absence, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that leaves no fingerprints. Just the clean, unmistakable space where your presence used to be indispensable. I went to bed early, the hum of the radiator lulling me to sleep. For the first time, I didn't dream of them. I didn't replay old conversations or imagine what they were saying about me. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like ownership. By the end of the week, I learned from a neighbor that the shouting at the house had lasted hours. Police lights had flashed once more, this time for a domestic disturbance. No charges, just noise. The kind of noise that used to fill my life, now distant enough to sound like weather in another city. In that moment, lying in bed with the city muted outside my window, I realized I wasn't missing anymore. They were. They had misplaced the person who kept everything from collapsing, and for once, I wasn't there to pick up the pieces. Winter stretched on, colder than usual, quieter too. Weeks slipped by like slow-moving clouds, and the distance between who I was and who I had become grew wider with every day. The calls eventually stopped. The text slowed, then vanished completely. At first, the silence felt foreign, like a room missing its furniture. Then it began to feel like peace. I learned things about quiet I never knew before. It isn't empty. It's full of small sounds that used to be drowned out: boiling water, footsteps above, the faint hum of traffic far away. Every noise was a reminder that life continued, and that mine finally belonged to me. People talk about revenge as something that burns, but mine never did. It wasn't made of fire. It was made of stillness. No screaming, no chaos, no grand confrontation. Just the slow crumbling of a system that was never built to stand without me. The family that had treated me like a convenience was discovering what it meant to live without the convenience itself. News reached me in fragments. A cousin mentioned the house had been sold. My sister had moved to another city, supposedly to start fresh. My father was living in a rented apartment near his office, smaller than the garage he used to complain about. My mother's messages came through mutual acquaintances, long, rambling, regretful paragraphs that never once contained the word sorry. Each fragment arrived like a delayed echo of the life I'd left behind, fading as it traveled. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered long before words could cheapen it. Every unpaid bill, every canceled service, every missing piece of comfort they once took for granted said more than I ever could. The silence between us had become the clearest conversation we'd ever had. I built a new rhythm in my small apartment. Mornings started with the smell of coffee instead of someone else's complaints. Evenings ended with books, soft music, and the freedom to exist without performing usefulness. Sometimes I caught myself smiling for no reason, realizing only then how long it had been since I'd done that naturally. On Christmas morning, almost a year later, I stood by the window watching the snow drift through the pale light. Somewhere far away, maybe in another rented house, they were waking up too. Maybe they thought about me, maybe they didn't. It didn't matter. I no longer needed to be remembered by people who had only ever valued what I could provide. I didn't want an apology. I wanted distance, and I had it. The funny thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with trumpets or milestones. It arrives quietly, sits beside you, and waits to see if you'll notice. One day I did. I noticed that I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not a call, not a reunion, not even closure. The story was finished, even if they were still trapped in the middle of it. I often think about that house, though. Not with longing, but with curiosity. It must feel heavier now, emptier in a way that walls can't hide. The laughter that once covered the cruelty probably echoes differently. Maybe they replaced the furniture, repainted the walls, tried to pretend it was just another year, another Christmas. But houses remember. They hold the shape of what was lost. And that one, more than anything, remembers absence. Sometimes at night, I sit by the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and tea cooling in my hands. The city glows beneath me, windows flickering with lives that are not mine. I don't envy them. I don't compare. I just breathe. The air feels clean, lighter than it used to. There's no noise to brace against, no sharp words waiting in the next room. Just stillness, mine and no one else's. People used to say I wasn't really part of the family. They were right. I was the structure, the quiet scaffolding that held everything upright. And when I left, they finally learned what happens when the foundation decides it no longer wants to carry the weight. I never wanted to ruin them. I only wanted to stop being the one who saved them. That's the truth most people don't understand about revenge. It isn't about destruction. It's about release. Now, when the nights grow cold and the city lights blur against the snow, I think back to that morning when I found those 3 tickets on the counter. I realize it wasn't the beginning of betrayal, it was the beginning of freedom. They had left me behind, and in doing so, they set me free. If you made it this far, tell me what you think in the comments below. And if you believe silence can be its own kind of revenge, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.